looking out my kitchen window. As I'm standing here looking out, today I find myself smiling. Not because something extraordinary happened, but because I remember something extraordinary about my childhood books. If you wanted to find me as a little girl, chances are my nose was buried deep inside of a book. I wasn't looking for trouble. I wasn't looking for attention. I wasn't looking for anything but another story. I could disappear for hours in the pages of a book. Those words became doorways that carried me into places my little feet had never traveled. My imagination became larger than my neighborhood, larger than any circumstance, and larger than what people told me life could be. You see, books gave me permission to dream before I ever knew that I was allowed to dream. One of my fondest memories is the little bookshelf in our home. We didn't have a mansion, but we had books. Looking back now, I realize what a gift that was. Then one day something happened. I received my first library card. I can still remember the excitement and the joy when the librarian explained that I could check out as many books that I could carry. I thought I had found heaven. Can you imagine? A place filled with thousands of stories, and someone was actually going to let me borrow them for free. Wow. You see, in our neighborhood, we didn't have a library building nearby. Instead, we had something just as wonderful. It was called a book mobile. Every week, that big rolling library would pull into our neighborhood park, put out the sign, and there I was, one of the first children waiting to climb aboard. I can still remember the smell of those books and the quiet excitement walking down those narrow aisles, just wondering, which adventure am I taking home this week? Every book became another journey, another story, another friend. And as a little girl, Dr. Seuss was one of my favorites. Those whimsical creatures, those impossible adventures, those silly rhymes. He taught me that imagination had no limits. He reminded me that life doesn't always have to make perfect sense to be beautiful and fun. And as I grew older, my reading began to change. I found myself searching for books about the African American experience. And those books opened my eyes. Some chapters was painful to read because they forced me to confront truths about our country's history and the lasting impact slavery had on generations of Black families. But they also gave me something incredibly precious. They introduced me to Africa, not only through the lens of slavery, but through the lens of civilizations, kingdoms, inventors, scholars, artists, and leaders whose stories had often been left out untold. But I sought them out. Those books helped shape my identity. They helped me to understand that my history did not begin in chains, that my story began long before that. Knowledge can replace myths. Truth can replace assumptions, and reading gave me roots. And as an adult, books had continued to shape the woman I am becoming. One book that deeply touched my heart was Sisters of the Yam. It gave me a voice to experience many Black women carried quietly. It reminded me that sisterhood is sacred, that healing often begins when we finally speak the words that we carried in silence. That book was so revolutionary for me back in the 80s. I still remember reading it, and I still go back to read it. Another favorite book as an adult is The Giving Tree. Well, many people think that book is for children, but for me, it is a book that teaches me about life. I see it as a lesson in generosity, love, sacrifice, and the importance of remembering that we all have something meaningful to give, even when we think we don't. Even when we think we have so little, we have something to give. And then there's the tree that survived the winter. That story reminds me that every season has a purpose. Winter is not a punishment. Sometimes it is preparation. Sometimes what appears lifeless is simply gathering strength beneath the surface. And then there is the book that I return to more than any other, and that is the Bible. When life feels uncertain, I open its pages. When I need wisdom, I open its pages. When grief comes, I open its pages. When joy overflows, I open its pages. The Bible reminds me that God has never left his people without hope. His words steady my heart, correct my thinking, and strengthen my faith. And remind me that no matter what season I find myself in, God is still writing my story. The truth is, books have never simply entertained me. They have educated me, comforted me, corrected me, inspired me, healed me, and challenged me. Some books made me laugh, like when I was reading Mad Magazine or Irma Bombach. Oh, some books made me cry when I read books about the African American slavery journey. Some books made me angry enough to seek justice. Some books gave me courage to become the woman I was created to be. And every good book leaves something behind: a question, a lesson, a new dream, a new ideal, a new perspective. Perhaps that is why I'm a writer today, because somewhere along the way, I realized that the books which changed my life was written by ordinary people who dare to share extraordinary truth. Maybe, just maybe, one of my books will become someone else's favorite someday. Maybe a young girl would hide herself behind one of my books, like I did as I was reading Dr. Seuss and so many others. Maybe another woman will read No More Crumbs and finally realize she deserves a full seat at the table of life instead of surviving on emotional leftovers. Maybe someone reading these words today and hearing these words has forgotten the simple joy of reading, not because you have to, because you want. We become so busy strolling on the social media and internet that we've forgotten the beautiful, amazing gesture of turning a page. A book asks something different from all of us than a screen. It asks us to slow down, to imagine, to think deeply, to listen, to wonder. Reading isn't just for information, it's transformation. And you know, science says many long life readers know that. Reading regularly strengthens your memory, improves your focus, builds empathy by helping us understand other people's lives, experiences, and even reduces stress. Just a few quiet moments with a good book can lower tension and give the mind a chance to rest. Every page exercises your brain by nourishing your heart. So today, I have a simple invitation for you. Find a book, visit your local library, get a library card, dust off that novel that's been sitting on your shelf. It could be poetry, history, a biology. Read stories that make you laugh, stories that make you think, stories that stretch your faith. Read stories that remind you that you are never, never beyond learning. Because every time you open a book, you open a door. And you never know which page might change your life. And as I'm looking out my kitchen window today, I realize that some of the greatest journeys I have ever taken never required a passport. They just required me to open a book and be willing to turn the pages. And as we're looking out, I'd like to ask you something. Get a book and read. Open your mind to the adventures that await you. And before we leave today, I'd love to know what book changed your life. Not necessarily the most famous book, but the one that met you exactly at the right moment. Tell me in the comments. You never know. Your recommendation may become the next book that changes someone else's life. Just me and you looking out the kitchen window and thinking about books and thinking about adventures. I'll see you next time.